Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, today is go time. We're going to modify the second channel like we did on the one that we tested in the last video. And I'm going to do a step-by-step showing you how to solder in. Guys, it's only like, it's like this little pile of stuff right here. We're replacing this guy with this guy. And then there's like 5 other resistors and a couple of pieces of wire and 1 3mm screw on each channel. This isn't rocket science. And it makes such a huge difference. You know, I haven't listened to it yet, so, you know, we'll see what, you know, I feel like after I've listened to it, but looking at the frequency response curve and the lack of distortion, I can't help but believe this is going to sound like a totally different amplifier. So, what you need to do this mod is you're going to need some kind of soldering iron, and I've got this fairly nice little Heiko unit. It's not what I would call a top shelf thing. It's a FD888D-23BY. You know, I think it was a little over $100. You want to spend a little less. For years, I used this little Velman, little blue box with a knob on it. I don't think it's as temperature controlled as this one is. It just has a rheostat, and that's how many watts the iron has. But it's a decent little iron, and I think these are $25 or something like that. What you do not want to use is some old giant 60-watt gun type thing with a big tip like that. These have their place for very limited things in electronics projects, but you don't want to try to do something like this with a big, you know, one of those big Wellers with a little loop thing on the end. Don't try to use one of those guys. Go, you know, even if it's just a pencil type that doesn't have an adjustment on it. It's a little 15 or 20 watt. Just need some kind of a soldering iron. The other thing you're going to need is some sort of a Phillips head screwdriver. It could be, you know, one of these jeweler's types, a fairly large size. I think it's a number 1. And the only thing you're going to be using it for is this one little Phillips screw that we're going to be screwing down this power resistor with. You want to have some kind of little needle nose pliers. They don't have to be these little jeweler ones, but you want something to hold these hot resistors while we're soldering them onto the ends of wires. So you want to have some sort of needle nose pliers. They can be a little bigger than this and it wouldn't hurt anything. And then you want some kind of small snippers like this. Don't, you know, again, don't use some like big, you know, wire cutters like you'd use on house wiring. Get some little flush cutting. Well, actually, they don't even need to be flush cutting, but if you're going to buy some, you might as well get some flush cutting ones. And you're going to need to trim some leads off. That's it. That's all the tools you need. And I guess the other thing, you would need the screwdriver to take the screws out of the bottom that hold the bottom cover on. And that's it. Not a lot of tools. This probably isn't going to be a super long video. I mean, I did go into some detail and kind of explaining some things as I went along. I'm not sure the link that'll come out to all edited, but anyway, enough talk. Let's get some action. Let's tear this thing apart. Okay, let's dive into this wiring. I hope I didn't scare people off with we're going to gut this thing, because actually we're not changing that much about it. We are completely rewiring this front end section, and we're going to change some values on the resistors over here, but a lot of the wiring we're leaving alone. And there's things we could do if we wanted to get really tricky. You could change up the heater wiring over here and only wire up one side of the tube, and then move which one was the plate so that you could swap these tubes left to right when they get old. I'm not doing that because I'm trying to keep this wiring and these changes as simple as possible. For you more advanced do-it-yourselfers, y'all can figure out how to do that. So First thing we're going to do is we're going to start disconnecting the wires on this output tube to get them out of our way. And so first we want to make sure we got our iron clean, get a little fresh solder on it, and then start getting some of these and just tucking these wires out of the way for now. And while this wire doesn't actually have to be moved, I'm just going to get it out of our way so we have a little more room to work here. So we want to come over here and we're going to disconnect this heater wire or this cathode resistor from the negative. This is our negative ground point. So we've got the cathode resistor disconnected. We're going to go ahead and heat this up and pull that capacitor out. And we got rid of the cathode resistor. And right here, what I'm doing here is I'm using the soldering iron to soak up some of the excess solder off this pin. And it looks like we've now got a hole up here for that one, so that'll make life easier. We're keeping this 470K grid leak resistor, and we're keeping this capacitor. That's the cathode bypass capacitor for the output tube. And we're also leaving this coupling cap. So we'll go ahead and lay that back down there to solder that to ground when we get around to soldering that ground up. So we're going to be installing a new cathode resistor, and I decided to use the chassis mount kind for a couple of reasons. We've got a screw hole right here that's not being used, so it's really easy to bolt one down there, and it also puts the resistor over here closer to the ventilation holes that are in the top of the chassis. So we just screw that down nice and tight. If you really wanted to, you could put some heatsink compound underneath it, but I think just tying this one leg down fine. This is a 10-watt resistor. We're not even using, I think, 2 watts, and so not going to have any problem with this overheating. And again, if you look, you can see right here there's some little ventilation holes, and so that'll help the heat on both sides. The resistor now is close to these vents, so that's a good thing. So now we need to connect these 2 pins to this resistor. So we come in here with this piece of wire. Go ahead and bend a little 90-degree bend in the end of it so we get a really good solder connection. Probably need to strip off a little more. Like that. And then actually, we can go ahead and kind of make a little U-shaped bend out of that. Leave just enough of it open so we can get it to hook into the hole. Like that. And then gonna get that positioned like that. Come in here and then go ahead and solder this on here. None of this stuff that we're soldering is particularly heat sensitive. So don't be shy about putting some heat on it and getting a nice solder joint like that. So then we want to pull this up, go ahead and loop this up like that. It's kind of hard to tell, but I've got it bent where it comes up and then over. And snip that off like that. And come in here and strip off a good bit of this wire because we're going to be going through both of these pins, or both of these terminals, like this. And guide it through till you get the wire going through both of those. And then come back and we want to solder this one first. Just like that. And sometimes the solder wants to, gravity's kind of working against you. And you may end up with the solder trying to puddle up down at the bottom. So this is a situation where you don't put a ton of, or leave the iron on it too long, because the solder will just all flow down the pin. So you want to get in there and solder and get out real quick so that the hole stays full. So we got that soldered nice. It's nowhere near this heater pin. Then the next wire we're going to connect is we need to connect the other side of this over to our ground. And we're going to go underneath this coupling cap. We can bend it up just a little bit to make life a little easier on us. And so we're going to want to go kind of loop it around. Cut off a piece of wire. And obviously, you use any color wire you want. I use 18 gauge solid core wire for all of my tube amp stuff. I know it's overkill, but I like how it stays in place and you don't have to worry about it like falling into something. Don't need stranded wire because you really don't need the flexibility. I don't know why these China amps almost all use stranded wire. So again, put a little hook on the end of it like that. And then we're going to come around this way. Hook that on there. Get that sitting like that. And go ahead and solder the wire onto the other side of this. Again, don't be shy about putting the solder on there. The other thing too is you want to let it cool off a little bit before you move it. If you move a wire that's been soldered onto a terminal like that before it's had a chance to cool, you can end up with what's called a cold solder joint, and it's not making a really good connection, and we want to avoid that if possible. So next thing we do is we're gonna, pliers might help here, pull this wire underneath and up. Hopefully I didn't make this too short. We can bend it over there a little bit, and I did. Look at that. I made the wire too short. Well, not really. That'll work. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so connected at this point, it's going to be this resistor, we've got this capacitor and this wire. And that's everything that's going to be soldered onto that terminal. So we'll go ahead and get that in place. And then come in and solder all that together. Just like that. And the last thing we want to do is this side of this capacitor needs to go through this hole like that. And then again, gravity is going to work against you here. One of the tricks you can do too is turn the amp on its side when you're soldering terminals like this, and then the solder won't flow down as you're trying to fill up this hole, or else do like I'm doing here and just be quick and get the heat off. And then look and make sure that you've filled up the hole. Didn't quite. There's a little space right there. Here we go. So now we got pins 1 and 8. I can't remember. One of them is the suppressor and one of them is the cathode. And in most pentodes, the suppressor and the cathode are connected together internally, but an EL34 isn't. So you do have to connect these two pins together so that it has that electrical connection. And we're almost done with the output tubes. We are going to hook our plate back up, which is this brown wire. We actually could have waited to hook that up because we got one more resistor that needs to go in there, but either way, it's not the end of the world. And then the last thing we need to do is we are changing this resistor right here. It comes with 100 ohm, and we're putting a 2K in here. So you just heat that up, and we want this to be as close to this pin as we can get it. So on one end, we're going to cut it off real short like this. And then we're going to leave the longer end. And actually, this one doesn't need to be. Not like that. Cut about that much off of this side. So on this channel, you want the resistor to look kind of like that. Real short on one end, a little bit longer tail on the other end. Then get your solder, come in here and tin this a little bit. Woo! They get hot quick, so be ready for that. Actually, probably a better idea to hold this with some pliers like that so you don't burn your finger. And that's just off camera. And then hold that real still while it cools off. Like that. Then you want to slide this heat shrink tubing back down. And I'm actually, I don't know why they didn't shrink this tubing up, but I'm going to shrink it up there around the resistor so that it doesn't go anywhere. And then I'm going to solder it to the inner hole of these two. They had it soldered to the outer hole. I'm going to solder it onto the inner hole so it's closer to the tube pin. Here we go. And that's our ultralinear or screen tap, however you want to refer to it. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off the top part of that just so it doesn't get in our way. So we still got the 470K grid leak resistor here. This is our coupling cap. That's the screen ultralinear tap with the 2K resistor. That's the plate from the output transformer. This is the cathode coming over here to this 250 ohm cathode resistor back over to ground. And then we have this coupling cap, or this bypass cap that goes across here. And I'm gonna make sure that none of this stuff is near the other pins. So we can go ahead and kind of go like that with that cap. Get it up out of the way. Get it away from those heater wires. And there we go. That's the output tube. So let me slide this back down. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we're going to remove all the signal wires off of the input tube. So the first thing we want to do is, that's the wire coming over from the potentiometer. Get it out of our way. And we're going to heat this up. Pull that out. And we're only using 1/2 of this triode. And I'll explain why when we get into the deep dive on the schematic. So you want to pull that red wire off, and this looks like it's the tail of the coupling cap, and we're just going to bend that back over in case we need that. I'm not sure if we do or not. Then you want to come in here with your snippers and cut that one. You want to cut one end each of those, that little X that goes across the bottom of the tube. And then I'm going to get rid of that wire. Get rid of that wire. Disconnect these two resistors. And then we're going to unsolder them from this other ground point they have here. Like that. Then the last thing we want to do is pull off this other red wire that they jumpered across the two plates with. And these you have to tug pretty hard. They've got them like wrapped around there. We get that out, and there we go. I'm going to shut the camera off here and take a little break, let the camera cool off. Well, that's it for part 1 on modifying this. I decided to go ahead and split this into 2 videos so they wouldn't be too long. And I hope you're enjoying this series. If you are, please subscribe to the channel, please like the video, and we'll see you for part 2 here shortly on modifying the A12 amp. Have a great day.